Hi everybody, I'm Tim from troutandfeather.com, and as you can see, we have Mr. Joe Messenger back. Joe, thank you so much for returning.
Thanks Tim.
You're welcome. So if you remember, in part one, Joe tied his father's fly, the Irresistible. Now Joe's agreed to sit down and talk a little bit more about fly tying, fly fishing, and some of those flies that his dad tied so many years ago. Stay tuned because we'll be right back. So we have Joe back, and we're going to pick your brain a little bit. We're going to go back in time just a hair. And Joe, why don't you start off by telling us, how'd you get involved in fly tying?
Well, I grew up with it. My dad made his living as a fly tyer.
Jeez.
And so I was always around it. Certainly wasn't very good at it, but I would tie flies. I was tying flies when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old. And I didn't tie the patterns that he did that were real complicated, like the frog and Irresistible, when I was real young. But as I grew a little older, and then unfortunately my dad passed away when I was 22 years old, and it kind of sunk in that I guess I thought he was immortal and that he wasn't going to be here anymore, nor were the flies that he created. So that was a pretty good incentive for me to follow it. I tied them certainly for personal use to fish with, and I never had any delusions about making a lot of money doing it.
Yeah.
But I think just kind of to honor him and keep his memory alive. But I've always enjoyed tying flies.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So you've been tying them for a lot of years. We don't have to have the exact number, but quite a few years.
Yeah.
Well, in part one, you tied the Irresistible, and during the tying, you talked about the story of how it got its name. Will you share that one more time?
Yeah, sure. A fellow by the name of Ken Lockwood, who was an outdoor writer, and this was back in the early 40s, really before World War II, was a friend of another fellow named Art New, who my dad was friends with. Art was a champion fly caster. He worked for South Bend, and he knew Lockwood. He called Dad or wrote to him and said, "Do you have any new fly patterns you could send to a friend, Ken Lockwood, who was in the hospital, maybe cheer him up a little?" So Dad sent some of his deer-hair drake flies. And Lockwood recovered, went up into Canada and caught a lot of brook trout on them, and wrote back to my dad and said, "Could you send some more of your deer-hair drake flies? The trout up here find them to be irresistible." And Dad thought, hey, that sounds a little better than deer-hair drake flies.
Sure.
So the name stuck, and that was the genesis of that name.
Jeez. And it's just one of those patterns that stuck around for 60, 70, 80 years now.
Yeah, well, obviously it would have to have been a pretty effective fly, or it wouldn't have. Yeah, it's a pretty fly, but there are a lot of pretty flies out there that maybe don't catch so many fish. It really doesn't imitate anything in particular, but that's not such a bad thing. An Adams doesn't really imitate anything in particular, yet it's one of the most popular and effective dry flies that's ever been tied. So, yeah, and it's kind of interesting that the flies that Dad tied were accepted all across this country and beyond, and nobody else tied them. He had a small shop in the basement of our house, and both his bass flies and the trout flies, that's where they came from. But yet, even during that time, he was well known and well thought of, and so were his flies.
Just receive accolades out of that small shop.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned bass flies, so let's shift gears a little bit. Many people out there, I guarantee they know the messenger frog.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about that pattern? All I know is that it's beautiful and it takes a long time to tie.
Yeah, that it does. I think I mentioned to you earlier, I wish Dad would have originated in Elkhart, Kansas or something. It would have made it a lot easier on me. But probably wouldn't have gotten the recognition that he did with it. The frog was one of his earliest patterns. And there again, in that time period, there wasn't a whole lot of materials to choose from. So deer hair was a choice that was readily available. He began tying the frog in some form really before World War I. My dad served in the army. He was in France where he was injured there, had a wound. And he had tied before that, so that was in 1916 or 17. And then when he was back home, he modified it or improved it, and that's sort of where it came from. He caught fish on live frogs, and that was the inspiration for it. The pattern is 100 years old.
Jeez.
And I think it's kind of interesting that if you look at flies of that period, and maybe I already said that, but they would still be accepted as a contemporary fly. They seem to be kind of timeless. So he was a pretty creative fellow.
Absolutely. And Joe had mentioned to me that frog pattern. If you haven't seen it, definitely Google it. And I think we have a picture included with this video. But if you look at it, it's one of those flies that you think somebody could have just came up with this fly recently, because it just has a really modern look to it. But it's to know that it's that old and it's been around for over 100 years.
Yeah.
It's just mind-blowing, because it's definitely stood the test of time. Now, do you still tie them for the public consumption? Can somebody still say, hey, I'd like one of those flies, or is it one of those not that anymore?
I don't really. They just take too long to tie. I tie some for collectors.
Okay.
And that sounds kind of stuffy, but
yeah. But that's the reality. Whenever you say it take a long time, how long are we talking?
Probably 3 hours to finish one up. Because I spend entirely too much time worrying about every hair on it, which, from a fishing standpoint, you certainly wouldn't have to do that. I do have a contract with Umpqua Feather Merchants there, and they tie them overseas at a price that somebody would want to fish with.
Okay.
And they work. Yeah, they're maybe not as polished or refined as these, but if you're going to go fishing with them,
they'll get the job done.
They'll do just fine. I think Tim and I were going over some of the design features of that frog and how it worked. It's pretty ingenious, if I do say so, and I had nothing to do with it. The way the legs were made, fly tires had, over the years, they would buy Dan's frogs and dissect them and try and figure out how he got the legs the way he did, and nobody really ever did that. And I did a video on tying it about 25 years ago. Yeah. And I guess it was a revelation to some people, but not too many people kept. I think the game was over then, the mystery was over.
Now we know.
Yeah, but Dad called them simply a bucktail frog.
Okay.
Since then, it's been better known as the messenger frog.
Okay.
And which is fine.
And deservedly so.
Yeah, but they're still in some of the catalogs, the fly shops and online, and Orvis carries them in their shops, not in their catalogs.
Okay.
So they are available if anybody.
So if you're looking for them out there, you can still find them. Try your best. Well, before I let you go, let me ask you one more thing. Talk a little bit about fly tying today for you. I mean, you've been tying for this long.
Yeah.
What keeps you motivated? Why have you stuck with it for this long? What's the allure for you still?
Well, I guess I always liked doing something with my hands and trying to create something, even if I am copying it. But also the people like yourself. In all these years, that's probably the most valuable thing I've gained from it. I've made some really good friends.
Sure.
I've gotten to see places that I normally wouldn't have. But I enjoy working with others. And if I can do something to help them, I help with the Project Healing Waters there. And it's not just fly tying, it's we build some rods and we take them fishing. But the fly tying's a big role. I worked for 5 or 6 years at a federal prison teaching arts and crafts, and mostly fly tying.
Fly tying, yeah.
That seemed to be the most popular thing we offered there. And hopefully it gave some of the fellows a little something to do
I'm sure it
besides
did.
get in trouble.
Yeah.
So I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. And there again, the bonus is friends like you.
Well, it's nice
that
to
I've
be.
gotten to spend some time with.
Yeah, trust me, it's a pleasure to be here. And thank you for everything you've done in fly tying and fly fishing. You know, honestly, you've definitely given a lot to others. So I guess we'll let you go now. Thank you one
All
more
right,
time for doing this.
Thank you for your interest in the message.
You're welcome. No, you're welcome. If any of you missed part 1, make sure you go back and watch Joe tie the Irresistible. He did just an outstanding job. It's a great fly. It still catches fish today. They're wonderful flies to have. But thank you everybody for watching so much. If you'd like to watch more videos like this, you can check out troutandfeather.com. If you have any questions or comments for Joe or for me, you can leave them down below in the comment section, or you can email me at tcammisa@gmail.com. Thank you everybody for watching, and Joe, one more time, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Tim.
You're welcome.
So long.
All right, we'll see you all next time.